Hi, everyone, and welcome back to The Things We Know. You may notice, if you are a frequent listener or watcher on YouTube, that we are super picky about the people that we bring on as guests because, well, one, we just are, but also we know three voices can be a lot and so forth. So when we decide to bring someone on, it's because they have something they know that we don't know. Is essentially it, or they know more about it than us. So today is a beautiful example of that. And we are super excited to have a guest on that I know you're going to fall in love with. And the reason I know that is because I have never met her, but I read her prep form and I immediately texted Karen and I was like, oh my God, I love her already. So
Yeah.
I'm so excited.
Yes. Yay. Yes. Today, you're going to meet and get to know Monica Lynne, a certified sex and relationship therapist who has a thriving practice called Balancing Life PLLC. And we are connected actually through a mutual friend, and we went to the same school. But that friend, who herself is a warrior and amazing woman who listens to the pod, and she just knew we had to meet. And she's right. And but we're both Broncos. We both went to Santa Clara, and there's some funny things about that we might get into, and that's a fun connection. So welcome, Monica.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to meet you both. You're so personable and easy within 30 seconds to just
Oh,
be like, this is fun. I love it.
Good. We're gonna have fun. So before we jump in, Lisa and I want to share more about you. Not only because it's so impressive and we both are like, oh God, I can't wait to talk to you. But the more we're learning about you, the more I already think we're probably going to have you back another time. Um, and as I said, Monica's a certified sex and relationship therapist. She has a background in health and fitness, having been a sexuality educator at a high school for 10 years, I guess, in your early career days, followed by 30 years in fitness, nutrition, and wellness coaching. And now currently a business owner of Balancing Life, working with individuals and couples around sexuality, health of self, and relationships, optimizing quality of life.
Monica is a biracial, open minded, non judgmental, ethically diverse, cultural woman who is passionate about being of service to others. She has experienced a 15-year marriage, divorce, birthing two sons, adopting a daughter from her father's Indian heritage, repartnering for 14 years, blended family life, death of a parent, and empty nesting.
Wow. Monica loves international travel, reading, working out, cooking, and eating healthy food and fine wines, kayaking, great TV series and movies, and laughter with her partner and friends and kiddos above all else. What is better than that? She also is, she says, very verbose and loves to talk, which is great because now we get to let you. Welcome.
Thank you. So
So
nice.
we always love to ask the question after we do that spiel. We always love to say, like, how does that feel to hear all of that?
I know. Well, it's funny because I was just listening to one of your other podcasts the other day with, I think her name's Gemma from New
Yeah.
Zealand.
Oh, yeah.
And she made the comment that everybody should write a bio because it just really it's really neat to hear that reflected back. So
Yeah.
I piggybacked on her idea on or her thought on your podcast, and I started implementing having my clients write a bio about how they show up in relationship. So like
Ooh.
instead of all the things that you are as an individual, like personally, professionally, but like who am I as a relationship individual? And so I'm starting to use that little idea to see what we learn about ourselves and our partners when we have to write a relationship bio. So
Oh, I love that.
yeah,
That's
kind of fun.
awesome. Yeah, that's really cool. All right, so let's dive in because again, I agree with Carrie. I have a feeling you'll be coming back, but we've got some good juicy stuff today. So let's start with the first thing you gave us on the prep form, which I loved. It says, I'm 54 going on 26, and I'm passionate about all aspects of health from a holistic lens, addressing mental health, emotional health, sexual health, fitness, nutrition, mind body connection. And I do all of it through a feminist lens. Woo! All the things I love. And so, not just for me and Carrie, but for all the women I know. The daughters that we all have. I have a daughter, and obviously we know this is a very uncertain time. Can you just start by sort of telling us a little bit about your journey and the work you do and just the clarity in this day and age around sexuality and all of that sort of thing?
Okay.
Big question, I know.
Yeah, big question. I'll try to keep it somewhat concise. One of the reasons, or probably the main reason I think that I attribute to the work that I do or that I got drawn to is because I am the daughter of two immigrant parents. One, my dad was from India and my mom was from Latvia. And because of that, my dad was raised Hindu and my mom was raised Lutheran and then became atheist. And so there was no way that they could combine any of that to raise my sister and I with religion. And so as a result, the absence of religion is really what allowed me to be able to kind of develop my own spirituality. It also was free of any influence around sexuality, like in any negative way. There was no hangups. My mom and dad were very open. So I just was raised in a house that there was not a lot of modesty, like nudity was fine and talking about sex was fine. And so I very naturally came into that ability to talk to people about sex. Kari and I were talking about being at a Jesuit school, Santa Clara. There's a lot of people that came from Catholic high school upbringings that didn't know a lot about their body or when you got pregnant or anything about sex and sexuality. And so I started sort of being an on-campus, resource for people. And then I was an accountant and I decided that I did not like being an accountant. So I went back to school and got my health degree. And that's when I started teaching sex ed at the high school level at Newport High School in Bellevue, Washington. And then later when I went back and got my master's, one of the supervisors was like, it seems like a no-brainer that you would be a sex therapist. And I'm like, oh yeah, that does make sense. So I think it's always just been this freedom of talking about it easily that's allowed me to kind of travel down this course of working with other people around it.
So I just want to get, so when you were in college, because you were so clear on it and didn't have any stigma, you were talking to other girls, I mean, our age essentially at the time, right?
Yeah.
Interesting. I mean, were you dumbfounded by the girls that didn't know anything?
Yeah, there was girls that were like, so when you have your period, that's when you can get pregnant, right? And I'm like, how are we 18 or 19 and have not understood this yet, But
Wow.
my mom taught me about sexuality. I mean, I don't remember not knowing. So I know that she taught me like very, very, very young.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I was raised Catholic and I did know about, fertility and cycles and things like that. Good job, Mom. But what I'm thinking about listening to you is I've said this before here. I was like embarrassingly too old when I realized that sex was for pleasure.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So we all went, oh.
Like to me, it sounded like what you do to have kids.
Oh, wow. I don't want to out you, but I'm like so curious, like how old were you?
Well, I'm trying to think of it. Like I think of like what kids know about it now. Like they learn really young, right?
Yeah.
So I want to say, maybe not quite middle school, but like older primary kid. Yeah.
Yeah.
And even then I didn't totally understand it yet until maybe middle school. Like, that I go, people.
I don't think that sounds very old.
Compared to everyone else, people were laughing at me.
Really?
Yeah. And maybe it was like middle school. I have time warp issues, but I have really great memory, but like placing it in time is hard.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. I don't know. And you can out me. It's fine. I just remember thinking like, oh, that's so interesting. And it reminds me of that Monty Python movie where it was, like they feel like they should have a baby every time they have sex, those Catholics, and the Protestants like, well, we've had 2 kids and we've had sex twice.
I think that's interesting because well, first off, I thought you were going to say like in high school. I mean, the fact that you're saying middle school to me, I didn't find out what sex even was until like 4th or 5th grade, And again, it wasn't that my parents kept it from me because my mom did actually, like, she came to me and was like, if you want to get on birth control, let's go do that when I was in high school. But I think it's interesting that was, I wonder if those kids were laughing because they were kind of like silly wagons. Like they also didn't know, but it made it look, no. Okay.
No. And it could have been more like 6th, 7th grade. I don't know, but no, I was really like, I was at a slumber party and they were like, what? I was definitely the last to know. So
gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Okay. My sister and I used to count the condoms in my dad's bedside drawer on a Friday, and then we'd count them again on a Sunday. And then at dinner, we would announce to my parents, you've had sex 3 times since Friday. Like that's how open we were as a family. And they would just
Amazing.
laugh and think that we were so funny.
You guys, and you're impressive with your math.
Yeah. So yeah, it's just never been hard for me to talk about.
That's amazing.
That's awesome. And so I want to ask about your work, but also just going back to what Lisa started with, like you do all of it through a feminist lens. Can you say more about that? Because I love that. And I think, you know, it is so important. I'm a big believer. I'm super excited about you and everything you do, because I'm just a big believer in, you know, that it needs to be very common that men and women love sex, you know, and there's no slut shaming, there's no such thing as that. And so like this feminist lens makes me feel like you're out to make sure like everybody owns their pleasure.
Mm-hmm. I think it's really broad, that word, at least the way I mean it, in that I think and talk a lot with my clients about, and it puts men off sometimes and some women as well. But when I talk about the patriarchy or toxic masculinity, or that I like work through a feminist lens, oftentimes all of those things make men feel in a heartbeat that I am a man hater, or that I'm against men, or, you know, some of those. And what I mean by that is that if we look at the way kids are raised, and you see that little girls from a young age are raised to express a huge range of emotions. So whether it's through their parents talking to them, or they're doing it with their, you know, play toys or dolls or whatever, they're asking, oh, are you sad? Are you frustrated? Do you feel rejected? Like all of these emotions come out. And boys are not given that same invitation. And so oftentimes as they grow up, the two things that seem to come the easiest and the safest for men is to feel angry or to show humor. And those are safe things for men to feel, but they feel the whole gamut of emotions, right? But they don't have the same experience or practice skill of tuning into themselves and saying, huh, what do I feel right now? I actually, you know, it comes out as anger, but what they might be really feeling is, I feel really rejected, or I feel really invisible, or I feel really deficient, or whatever those
afraid. Yes.
Yeah. And it comes out as anger or humor, and then it never gets touched upon. And so when we don't stop to look at how the patriarchal norms for men and women and how they're societally raised is affecting us, then I think we miss a whole piece of how people show up in relationship and sexually. So even with that said, like as openly as I was raised, I know that sexually in my earlier years, I was very performative. You know, you hear what it is that men think is hot. And so you do those things because you feel like, oh, my currency is wrapped up in how I come across sexually, how I look, what I'll do, how I perform. And so we end up as women doing a lot of things that we don't really want to do. We say yes when our body says no. And so the older I got, the more I just felt this really strong passion to say, women need to stop being performative, and they need to really tune into what feels good to them, because truly their partners want that too. You know, their partners really, I mean, if you look at, you know, and pornography can be a useful tool and something that can be a good consensual thing, but it also is at the root of a lot of things that cause men to feel deficient in the way they show up and women to feel performative. And so if we look at that and if we don't talk about that, and we don't look at this through the feminist lens of porn's made for men through the male gaze, we have to take that back and say, like, what is it that makes a woman feel really good inside herself and with a partner? Because most of the men that are on my couch in my office are saying, I don't want to have sex with a partner just to have sex. I want her to feel pleasure. I want her to desire this. I want her to desire me. And so most of the work I do is like, well, let's look at what messages she's gotten as she's been raised and what you've gotten as you've been raised, so we can break this down and see what's actually organically true for both of you. So when I say the feminist lens, it's really more about, can we strip away all this societal messaging that has been doing damage to us, and really get to the root of what makes us more alike than different, if that makes sense.
I mean, we talk
about, so great.
Yeah, we talk about it all the time. We were always saying the patriarchy isn't men. The patriarchy hurts men as much as it hurts women. You know, so so the opposite's true with feminism. If you are coming from a feminist lens, it is going to help men as well. But there's been such stigma around both those words, and they've been adopted in ways that are not true to what they mean. So this is perfect. A beautiful example.
Yeah.
I love it. Thank you. It's interesting that you say that, because I was just listening to another podcast that was discussing Inside Out 2, and how beautiful it was almost the entire time to really look at these complex emotions that are learned. And then at the end, just, being, like, to cater to like the norms, they went inside the dad's head and it was like, yeah, let's go back to the game or something like that. And so, and I haven't seen it yet. I'll still see it. It didn't spoil it for me, but it's like, why would we like take them through this whole journey only to just belittle like the capacity men have to feel anything besides humor and anger, right?
Yeah, really good point.
I love that clarity. Thank you so much for that, especially as a mom of 3 young men, like
you have 3 boys.
Yes.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So obviously you work with couples and individuals around, and so I want to talk about romance, because you mentioned something about that. Can you tell us about, when couples are coming to you, how do you help them with the romance part? Just, I've been married almost 20, like we'll be celebrating 29 years in August. And Lisa, you're close.
We'll be celebrating 27, but we've been together 35, 37.
Right. So like romance is sometimes hard. How do you work with people around that? I'm imagining that's part of what you're doing.
Yeah. And it's funny that you say that, because I grew up with a dad that was such a romantic. Like, he would come in every day and he would whistle at my mom and he'd call her beautiful, and he would dip her and kiss her in the kitchen every single day. So I grew up thinking like that's what every man does when he shows his love, right? And so I've always been a big
also. I mean, that 100% that's what they all do. Yep.
I mean, I didn't experience that in my marriage. It was definitely something that I thought was, romance was definitely the thing. And then when you just said that, I realized that in my practice, I hardly ever use that word. And I was like, what is it that I'm using instead? I think I use the word connection in place of that. And so I think the thing that happens most is that people hear in society that the quality of your marriage may be linked to how often you're having sex. And so if people aren't having sex, they feel like their marriage is struggling. And often it is because of other reasons, emotionally or, financial reasons, whatever. But they'll come in because they're saying, well, we're not having sex. And oftentimes one partner, and I don't like to gender things because oftentimes it's, it's not always the same, but more often it is the male in a cis-het relationship that might be saying, I wish that we had sex more often. And instead of looking at the sex as the end goal, I try to get them to say, okay, so sex is a byproduct of good connection. So instead of coming in and saying like, how can we get you guys to have sex more often? I'm always looking at how can we get you to be more connected? And so that's, I think, what you're talking about, Kari, with the romance. So some people, they really thrive off of that emotional connection. Some people are really like touch. They want physical touch a lot. If you look at just the kind of 5 love languages, of which there's way more than 5, but some of those things are the things like, how can we increase the amount of time that you two are asking each other deep questions, using like an Esther Perel, where do we begin game, or Best Self has these question cards. How can we bring in intentional times of having good conversation, whether it's on the couch, looking at each other with eye contact, or giving each other a foot rub while you are asking some of those questions, or going on a walk and holding hands, but implementing somehow that you are touching each other and having eye contact and having depth of questions and emotional connection almost always brings people closer. Some people really thrive off of intellectual intimacy. So they want to bring up current events or an article they've read or something that gets them firing in that way. But it's more about how can we increase the connection in your relationship, because the more connected you feel, as a byproduct, you're going to have more access to your own sexuality. So I don't want to talk somebody into trying to be sexual when they're like, I don't feel connected to my own arousal or desire. Therefore, my partner doesn't feel desired because I'm not in connection with my own. Let's get into connection with each other and see if, as the byproduct, sex happens more often.
I love that. Because when I was asking it, I was thinking about the thoughtful things like your dad, I would say in general, to me, sex is easier than romance, and so I like what you're saying about connection. Because that does really mean listening to each other, thinking about the other person, going to an extra effort, and so you're right. That's an extension of
Well, it feels
going
like
deeper.
root cause.
Right.
Right. That I love that you called sex a symptom, because I mean, it feels like root cause. To your point, you can always have sex, right? But
Yeah.
what does that elicit? You know, is it check it off because we're supposed to be having sex as a couple, or am I actually embodied when I'm having sex, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's a good point.
Yeah. So what kind of people come to you? Like what is, I mean, I heard a couple of examples there, but if you're working with couples around connection and both sexual and intellectual and emotional, all those sort of things, tell us about maybe some of the typical couples that come to you.
I would say probably a third of my practice would be couples that have just gotten disconnected, whether it is because of children. Sometimes it's couples that don't have children, but they are just feeling like there's a sense of, distance that's grown between them. And, if you haven't had sex with a partner, everybody's different, but some people it's like 2 weeks, some people it's 2 months, some people, whatever, but it becomes awkward almost to initiate that again, even though you've done it a million times, but you're like, this feels so awkward to initiate because we haven't been sexual with each other in a while. And so sometimes it's couples that are just stuck in that and they haven't had sex in a year or two and they don't know how to kind of get back on the horse, so to speak. Sometimes it's couples that have gotten themselves into a pattern of their dynamic of communication that is really bitey or toxic in the way that they talk to each other and they don't feel seen and heard. And so it constantly causes this like rupture and volatility. And then that leaves them disconnected. So they don't know how to do the moments of connection. A third of my practice is working with people that have endured sexual assault. And so there's a whole another set of, elements that come into play when you're trying to access sexuality within yourself, but you have a trauma history of that being negatively or maliciously. And then a third of it is actually not what I ever thought I would enter into, but I seem to have a lot of polyamorous and ethical non-monogamous couples that are trying to figure out how do I open the relationship, or we have opened it and we opened it without a lot of care. And so now we have a lot of conflict. So
that's interesting.
Kind of the bulk of
wow.
That's really fascinating. Kari and I do know several couples like that, and it is interesting the ones that have done it sort of guided, and the ones who have just decided they're going to do it, and it doesn't. Yeah, it's interesting how that all pans out. But I love that you deal with all those different areas, including poly, because I've said this before on the pod, but as I get older, and again, I've been with my husband for 35, 37 years. We've been together since we were 18. We are monogamous, but I do find monogamy to be a construct that was created when we died at 40. Like I'm a little bit like, is this really who says who? So would you like to talk about that?
Well, I mean, there's so many thoughts and feelings I have around it, because I agree, like, and marriage, I was never one that really believed in marriage, even because I wasn't raised in a religion. So it wasn't something that was, something that I was raised thinking was the right way to go. And I think you're right in that when people were getting married, they were getting married for 10, 15, 20 years. And because the lifespan was so much shorter. I mean, and in some ways, like, I think they say that humans are not monogamous, that there's very few actual animals that are monogamous. So we're not wired to be that way. However, then when you have people in the poly community challenging the emotion or feeling of jealousy and say that's something that you can get over, I'm like, I don't really believe that either. I think that jealousy is sort of hardwired in us also, and perhaps it has something to do with evolution. If you knew that this person is the father of your child, that keeping them close to you would increase your odds of keeping your offspring, in a place where it's advantageous to the human race to feel jealousy in some ways, because with somebody who's going to look out for you and raise children together. So I don't think that we're monogamous like by nature, but I do think that there is a pull towards that evolutionarily also. And I watch so many poly, I mean, conceptually, I think poly makes all the sense in the world. Why would it not? To have lots of people that you love and that feed you and fuel you and all the things. But then I watch so many clients that suffer so much pain, you know, like there's a lot of pain in sharing your partner. And that has been a wild ride to witness it and to see all the facets and the complexity of non-monogamous relationships.
Absolutely.
Very interesting. Thank you for sharing.
I mentioned the other podcast you were on, and I really loved you. You just mentioned that you work with quite a few people with sexual assault history. And I was going to ask you about sexual trauma, which obviously includes that, but that made a lot of sense to me. And I think Lisa and I both know a lot of people who don't have a sex life. Either they don't think it's important, or they just like past trauma or generational trauma around sex is causing physical pain or just lack of desire. So could you say a little bit more about that, about the kind of work you do, hopefully in a way that gives people like that hope?
So I think there's such a range, like all of my clients come to my head at the same time and I can't decipher one. I think the biggest thing is being able to take your agency back as a human when that's been taken from you in childhood. Then I think it's really important in the work that I do to be able to say, like, let's hold the space for this experience in life to be unpacked in a way that you actually get to fully be heard and seen, because most of the time the clients that come to me with sexual assault have not really told anyone, or when they've told someone they haven't been believed, whether it was a parent or a prior therapist or somebody. So they're kind of unloading for the first time in real depth. And in that process, I think there is a level of being able to see that what happened to them was wrong, was not their fault, was not their choice. And that in that, as they start to figure out what is the real essence of me, what is it that I really want, how do I start to form boundaries around my body, around sexually saying yes or no? Because so many times, like I say, people, especially women, say yes when their body is really saying no. And so it's amazing the power of being able to just talk about that. That's what I've seen with a lot of my clients, male and female. I have lots of male clients that have been sexually assaulted also. But it's that ability to talk about it and to be heard and to say, wow, I'm unloading this. The one type of therapy I do is called ACT therapy, which is acceptance commitment therapy. And the way I always explain it to my clients is all these things have happened to every one of us in our lives. Lots of different things, right? And all of those past traumas can get really big and really heavy, like a big balloon that is just like giant and it's weighted with like lead inside. And so you're trying to like, you can't see over it or under it, and it's really heavy and it drains you. And that when trauma is showing up in your life like that, it's really, really hard to navigate the rest of your life because it's taking up so much space and weight. And so just talking about what's happened allows that to shrink and get smaller, so that if you can say, we're never going to have this not have happened in our life, we're never going to be able to have amnesia and pretend that this incident didn't occur. But if we can get it to shrink by processing it and unpacking it and talking about it and holding tender, loving space for it, that it could get smaller and lighter, so that it's like, okay, this is manageable. I can hold this next to me and still do my life, because it's gotten smaller. And then certain times something might come up, somebody, touches you or looks at you or says something, and it gets bigger again and it holds more weight. And then it's about talking through it so that it gets more manageable again. Mm-hmm. So I have seen a lot of progress with people that have been able to have that shrink in weight and intensity, so that they can access their true arousal desire with boundaries that allow them to not feel reoffended when they're sexually engaged.
That's so beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah. That's, gosh. I have another question I want to ask, but I'm compelled to ask you right now, how do you hold that space? I mean, I know how you hold the space. How do you not let that affect you?
Ooh.
Yeah. Because I'm listening to you and I'm getting teary, right? Yeah. Like I'm feeling verklempt around this. So I just wonder how you take care of yourself.
Oh, that's so sweet, Lisa. As therapists, we need to go to therapy ourselves. So I do that. I also, my partner is also a therapist. And so it's nice. Really, really helpful for him to understand exactly what I'm like. I don't have to explain what it's like to be a therapist. He already is, right? So he knows what it feels like. So that helps a lot. We have some case consult groups. So once a month we get together with other people. And if you have issues that you're like, I want to know what other therapists might think about this, that can be helpful. But I won't lie, like on a daily basis, it's really draining. Like I see clients Monday through Thursday mostly, not sometimes on Fridays, but by Thursday night, like tonight I have a massage that I scheduled, but otherwise I will go home to my couch and my dog will jump up there and I will turn on Netflix and watch something that is so far from what I do.
Yeah.
And just tune out. And you end up having less of a bandwidth for your friends, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Because as friends, we get together and talk also about the pain in our lives. And so
Right.
sometimes I do get intrusive thoughts from some of my sexual trauma clients, and that can actually interrupt my own sex life. Like I will be enjoying myself and then all of a sudden think about a client that has endured something really awful. And so I have to sort of do what you said before, Lisa, that embodiment of like getting that thought to kind of sit over here while
Yeah.
I tune into what I'm feeling, seeing, smelling, all the things that are more sense related and embodied. But yeah, it can be really hard. And there's also kind of an ethical rule as therapists that you sort of balance your load so that you're not seeing all trauma clients.
Makes sense.
So that you have
Okay.
a mixture of it so that in one day, I don't think I could do all sexual assault every day. Like I couldn't specialize in that, although I feel
Yeah.
like I'm specialized in it, but not solely.
Yeah.
But
Thank
thank
you.
goddess you're there doing that work.
Holy moly. I mean,
wow. Thank you.
whew. That's all I was thinking as you were talking before. I was like, oh my God, I wish I could clone you. You're just so needed, because, and this leads to my next question, which is, you know, we started out this pod thinking it was going to be for women of a certain age, right? I say that all the time. It is no longer that, and it hasn't been from the get-go. And so I hear from women of all ages, that they are grateful to about the things we talk about. And I've had people actually ask me, can you talk about sex from the perspective of society says, men only are the ones that always think about sex and women don't really like it. And especially as we get older, and we see, and I've experienced, and also I have friends who've experienced it where the woman, as she's getting older, is more sexual and the husband is not. And we know it is, it's somewhat biological, right? Our estrogen's going down, their testosterone's going down, but society doesn't paint us that way. And so there's also that sense of like, as you get older, is this weird that I'm feeling super sexual and now I'm the one that's having to go after it and initiate it, and if you're not used to being that way. So I guess I'm not entirely sure about my question around this, but I guess just, is that do you see that a lot? Do you experience, talk about that aspect? Sorry, I got all side noted.
That's okay. Well, I like when I find myself listening to you say that, I feel like that's such a beautiful, exciting thing. And I don't know if that's what society, they see us as we get older as like, ew, I don't want to see old people sex, but to me, I hear you say that. It's like how beautiful and exciting that as kids are grown, as you have more bandwidth for each other,
more time.
Yeah. Right? Like it's not
Yeah.
becoming a chore or when can we calendar this? It's becoming like we have so much more time. How can we spend it together and how can we derive pleasure? Because sex and masturbation is so healthy. It's such a healthy thing for stress. It's healthy for your immune system. As we get older, we're experiencing more disease and, all the things that can bring us downward. So why not be ramping up on the things that are positive, healthy coping mechanisms and have great results? So I love that. I definitely have people that are going through divorce. It seems like when men and women are in their like low 50s, they start to panic thinking that, oh my gosh, all of my best sexual years are behind me and now I'm not going to find a person, or I'm too old to be able to have great sex with somebody else. And I have a client who's 67 and having probably the best sex of his life, so it's like, that's great. I love for people to know that this just keeps getting better as long as you're able to physiologically feel good and healthy in your body. I think that the biggest thing is really being able to understand your own body and your partner well enough to know what helps them access their arousal and desire. Because once you know that you can access that, that's when you then have your desire go up and then your partner feels desired. Like one of the things, I have some Instagram reels that I do. And one of them is from a Tantra book that I read. I'm going to forget their names and I want to give them credit. Diane and something Richardson, I think. But they wrote a book, and one of the lines that I loved the very most was, I hope it's okay to say this on here. You can edit it out if it's not.
It is.
It's fine.
They said no woman's vagina should ever be entered unless she is dripping wet and pleading for her partner to come closer to her.
Love it.
I read that and I was like, yes, that's so true. Because so often we get into this rote thing of kissing, a little touching, maybe a little oral foreplay, and then penis is inserted into vagina.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not even pleasurable at that point, right? Like,
right.
If men have it in their head that women love penetration, which not all women do, and most women don't achieve orgasm from that, and most women actually don't get to a place of loving penetration until they're in a space where they're really in touch with their desire and arousal, then like that's such an important key concept for men to understand. Like putting your penis in is for you, not her. So if you want her to have a good time, then get to the place where she is literally pulling you towards her because she wants that. Yeah. And then what you end up with is the partner feels so desired. I mean, imagine if a man is just trying to push his penis into a vagina versus if she's like, come here and pulling his hips.
Yes.
Right.
Like that's a totally different sexual experience. So
completely.
If people understand that, then there's so much more time spent on how do I get my partner to feel sexy and aroused and seen and attended to and attuned, and then how do we have enough foreplay to get both of us to a place where it's like going back to whenever you first were sexual as a teenager or whatever in your 20s, and you had that like, oh my gosh, I know we shouldn't, but I want to so badly, you know.
Yes.
That's
I'm just thinking about what you're saying, and it's so true. And I think you touched on this. That's men. We talk in media, we talk a lot about men being selfish and being just out for them and just putting it in. But really, truly, most men I can think of, like they want so badly to, like they'll feel so good about themselves if they can, make sure you have a good time. Like that is they desire. And so I love how you just described that, because that is a win-win. That is you feel good and I feel amazing for helping you feel good. Yeah.
But if we don't have these conversations, then there's a whole bunch of people out there that don't know that
they're just doing it rote.
Yeah. So, and when you said this podcast is, you thought it was for women of a certain age, but now you know it's for all women. Like one of the things that I think is really important in teaching through the feminist lens and breaking down toxic masculinity is getting men to listen to this.
And they do. I will say that's also been a surprise.
Yeah,
that's true. What's interesting when Lisa and I were first, both kind of starting our businesses, and then we were on staff helping other coaches like create what, kind of like their marketing statement, like what do you do, right? And one of the examples given was, I help women, feel so great. They're having the sex life they had in their 20s. And it was so funny because a friend of ours, Stacy, and I were like, we're having way better sex now, because like 20s, it's not just the times. Like, I think you didn't, well, a lot of us, maybe that's not true of women in their 20s now, but we didn't have the confidence or the experience yet to know all that, to think about like the ways we could both enjoy it. I think we just kind of were doing it. Right. And that idea that like 20-year-olds have better sex was just like hilarious to us.
That is so funny. I love that.
But I'm curious though, like, do you mostly work with people that are older? Because in my mind, I guess because I have a daughter, I do feel like my daughter is much more understanding of her pleasure is important. And I do think, I mean, yes, obviously we're pretty open around here. Charlotte will always say, you're so sex positive. I'm like, thank you. I mean, I took what my mom did and I broadened it, right? And my husband and I are very affectionate around. We joke all the time about having sex. Like the kids they still do the squeezy up the face thing. Like, I don't really need to hear that. But it's been a conversation for as long as I can remember.
Yeah.
But I do feel like my daughter understands her own pleasure in a way that I did not at 18. So I do feel like, and maybe it's TikTok, maybe it's Instagram, Maybe it's porn. I don't really care how she got there. I'm just glad she got there because I wasn't there at 18. So do you see younger women and men?
Yeah. My youngest clients are, I think the youngest I've seen is 20,
Okay.
and the oldest is 67. But yeah, I think that's a really good point, Lisa, because if you look at like the work that I do with LGBTQ clients, also, if they're older, that's such a different experience. If you're a
Yes.
50-year-old man, say, coming out, or woman, versus a 18 or 19 or 20-year-old, because we live in such a different time now that there isn't the same phobias and stigmas. So they are having a different experience of acceptance at an earlier age in queer, culture, as well
Yep.
as, I'm guessing you're right, with women that are younger now are probably tuned into more that sex should be as pleasurable for a woman as it is for a man, which is maybe not what we grew up with. Although
Yeah.
I would say that I'm surprised by my 20-something clients that are female identifying do still find that they fall into that performative nature.
Mm.
And I don't know if that's because of pornography is still most of what people watch, unless they're subscribing to ethical porn or porn made by women or something, that's more of the Pornhub type of stuff, is showing that women are being performative for male pleasure. And so
Sure.
I think there's maybe some truth to both, that they're growing up more empowered and in touch with their body, but they might still be stuck in a place of feeling like they have to do certain things to have their currency higher.
Yeah.
And so I still think we're probably right that the people in their 30s, 40s, and 50s, and 60s, and 70s are having better sex than the people.
Yay. Right. We're right in the middle of
Huzzah!
that. So can you talk about like couples that come to you where one or both the attraction is gone? Like, how does that get rekindled? And I know you touched on this a little, but Lisa and I were really kind of saddened and surprised at our last retreat to hear women just really being like, yeah, that's not happening.
Mm-hmm.
But they're still married, right? So I'm curious about that. Like, what kind of work? And it sounds like a long journey, but I'm assuming if they're coming to you, they want that.
Yeah. Gosh, I just want to name transparently that I feel aware of the fact that my answer to a listener could be either inspiring or crushing. And so I just want to say that with sensitivity, that and this is only what I found. I'm just one sex therapist. There's lots of people out there, so I wouldn't, take
Thank
mine as a
you.
blanket statement.
Thank you.
But the people that come to me, that when I talk about how they met or what their relationship was like in the beginning, and they talk about a really good chemistry that was there, and attraction and fun and playfulness and connection and all of that, but they've gotten so far away from it. I've had a lot of success getting people back to that. The couples that do come to me and say, basically, they admit either in their individual solo sessions or once we start working, the three of us, that they really never had that. Those are the ones that I don't see a lot of people ever getting to that. Like you can meet somebody and feel like you have a really good friendship, and it can blossom into romance and connection. But when you meet somebody and they're really good on paper, say, like I've had people say that, like, well, we had the same values and we went to the same church and we wanted the same number of kids and he was really nice and I liked his family, or I liked her family, she seemed like she'd be a great mom. But they never really had that kind of chemistry, sexual chemistry. And then they get married, and later, 15, 20 years later, they're like, well, we just can't really get to a place of having great sex. It's like, well, you never did, so
Yeah.
people sort of, that's why part of the work that I'm starting to do too, I went down to my son's fraternity at Cal Poly University and talked to his fraternity and two of his friends' sororities around the topic of mate selection, because I don't know that anybody really ever comes back and talks to us about, like, how do you know you've met the right person to enter into a long-term commitment if you're going to do that? Like, we know that is the most important decision you could possibly make, right? You both know it because you're still in it. I know it because I've traumatized my children from having to go through divorce. And so that's really difficult. And it's such an important decision, but nobody really comes to you and says, hey, these are the things that will help you know if you've met the right person. And if somebody told somebody in their 20s that had been dating somebody they met in college for 2 years, and they're like, yeah, we've never really had a great sexual connection, but everything else is really great, so I'm going to marry them anyway. If you were able to talk to those young people and say, you might want to pause and think about that, because if sex is important to both of you and it's not there and never has been, why do you think it's going to all of a sudden appear at year 5, 10, 15, or 20? So that's a piece of it too, is I think that the people that have had it at one time have a much higher chance of getting back to it. People that have never had it may be looking at, you know, a really tough road.
I think that's just, I mean, you're right. It's your, that makes total sense. I guess I want to say just that makes total sense to me. I mean, how do you especially when you've got the distance of kids in between, right? Because you lose yourself when you lose that connection to some extent when you have kids, right? Because you're focused on the kids. That's what we're sort of supposed to do. And then all of a sudden you're empty nested and it's like, if you didn't have it to begin with, how are you going to all of a sudden get it back?
Right.
There was nothing to get back. That makes total sense
I'm
to me.
sure there's exceptions, you know, I'm
sure,
sure
of course,
to the rule of that grows, but
I'm so curious about what are the things when you were talking to his fraternity that really like struck them or surprised them, if you could share. I'm just curious, like talking to a group of young men. These young men in my life. Love this.
One of the things that I thought was really interesting was that the guys said that so one of my friends that's a sex therapist had thrown this at me, and I was actually really surprised. And I feel kind of stupid admitting that I didn't think this was true. But he was saying that most men, and I'm sure there are men out that are going to say this is not how most men are. And so I don't want a blanket statement that either, that this is most men. But a lot of men have, when I've asked them, have said that when they see, if they are cishet and attracted to women, they are seeing a woman and immediately thinking about what would it be like to be with that person. And so when they're walking through the world, whether it's at the grocery store, at the beach, or, you know, wherever they are, that they're often seeing women and thinking of like, how would that be to be sexual with that person? And I didn't really realize that because I mean, doing fitness, I've been a fitness instructor for 30 years. I mean, I'm looking at people at the gym and I can see that they're either have a nice physique or, you know, they need help here or there, but I'm not sexualizing them. And so that was one of the things that came up in talking to the fraternity guys, is they were saying, yeah, they were all kind of in agreement. Like, yeah, we do that. But they were saying it's kind of like it goes like flashes through. So if it's a thought at first, it's not like 3 hours later they're holding on to like, oh, that girl at the grocery store, I'm still thinking about what it would be like to be sexual with her. Because when I told the sorority girls that this was something that the guys had said, they were, oh my gosh, they were up in arms. There was one girl that just raised her hand. She's like, I'm gonna have a fight tonight. Oh. You know, they were just really upset by that. But I think as women, sometimes we think that if you think of that person in a sexually positive way, that now I have been demoted, or now I am in competition with that. I should be insecure. And so one of the things that was interesting was just to see that men's brains are wired differently, and not all men again, but some men's are, and that could be something that if we knew that from a younger age, that we would then be able to grow up saying, okay, well, this is just a, you know, a factor of what it's like to be male. And as a female, I don't need to get, you know, upset about that. So that was interesting for them. They were like, I don't want, you know, my girlfriend to think that that means that I don't love her or I don't want to be with her, but that is factoring through my head.
Interesting.
I mean, I kind of love that. And I think you're exactly right.
It doesn't surprise me at all.
It doesn't surprise me, but also like, you're right. If we knew that going in, and we didn't stigmatize it as being gross for that, there was just like, that is how their brain works, and we didn't go, well, that's just how boys work, right?
Well, yeah, because thoughts, right? We're not policing thoughts.
Correct. Yeah, right. And then it would no longer, it would just be a fact of life, so to speak. Interesting.
And the biggest thing the girls loved, they were like all snapping for it, was the tip I shared about the Tantra book. You know, just like if they wanted more guys to know, like, slow it down, get the foreplay going, and wait until, you know, she's really wanting you and pulling you. And that was something that they were really resonated with them. And they wanted all the men in the world to know that that's what you should be doing if you really want to have great sex.
Slow it down. Yeah.
On that topic, I think we were discussing this recently, and this sounds like something that might be in line with you, Monica, which is like, women want you to slow down with their bodies and men need you to slow down with their hearts. Right? I don't know if you agree with that, but it made a lot of sense to me for like the person I'm married to, and and a lot of the men that I have known in my life, that like, you know, you can't just like, they won't just open up right away, you know? And I know that's being very, like making a huge generalization, but.
Well, I think it plays into what happens a lot, again, from the way we're raised societally different, is that a lot of women will say, I need to be emotionally connected to you in order to want to have sex with you. And a lot of men will say, I need to have sex with you in order to feel like I can be vulnerable and safe and then emotionally connect with you. And that's a real problem, because we are at a real standoff if that's, if one person's needing one first and the other's needing the other first. And so I think, this may feel unfair, but if a woman's body, she should always have autonomy and agency over her body, right? You shouldn't be saying yes when you're not ready to, because it's just not going to be a good experience. And it can actually cause you to have trauma. I have clients that feel like I am their wife, therefore I should be having sex twice a week. And they've been doing that for decades and actually caused vaginismus, the tightening of the vagina, because they are like saying yes all the time when they don't really want to. But if we could say, all right, well, if it's ideal for both people to be accessing desire, and a man is saying it's difficult, like you're saying, slow down with my heart, then the doing things that allow you to focus on that connection again could be the things that also allow him to feel safe, to be more vulnerable and get to an emotional place that then allows that emotional connection to start, which then allows you to access arousal and desire. Nice. So I think it is super important for men to also be able to feel like that they're safe in expressing themselves and being heard. And then part of this whole toxic masculinity thing too is the women that are saying, oh, I think that this is a male problem. Like, you guys are the ones that are keeping each other down, yet they then get uncomfortable if their husband or man or whatever is crying or is vulnerable or is expressing themselves sensitively, because they're like, oh, well, that's not a really strong man. Like, that's just as toxic for a woman to do that. So it's all about having women change and broaden their perception and expectations of having a man be really vulnerable and really expressive and really communicative and all those beautiful things, so that he then can have his heart feel safe to be shared, and that enhances the relationship. So yeah, I like the slow down with the heart.
I know, I love that. We have talked about, or you and I have talked about that before. That's great. And again, this goes back to patriarchy hurts men as much as it hurts women.
Yeah.
And it's not
and it causes bad sex.
So right there, we should want to get rid of it. Yes, that's the reason to get rid of it.
Maybe
and like Ken said,
maybe if we led with that, if we said patriarchy causes bad sex, then men would be like, oh, okay, well,
screw patriarchy.
Yeah, screw patriarchy, exactly. Oh my gosh. So how did you get into this work? I know it's from your openness, like it sounds like naturally this is who you are.
Yeah.
But like, what do you love most about it? What made you do this?
I think I had a really good sex ed teacher at Interlake High School. His name was Gordon Dickman, funny enough, his last name. And
awesome.
My dad would send these articles from the Seattle Times to me down there at Santa Clara when I was educating these girls, and I was an accounting major. And I thought, gosh, that looks like way more fun than being an accountant. So I kept, thinking that. And then I went back to school to get my health degree. And then I taught at Newport High School. And my mentor teacher was Barb Velategi, and she was like the best. She's like state renowned. She's probably the best sex ed teacher in the nation. She's amazing. And so I had really good tutelage under her. And then I taught that for 10 years. And then, like I said, when I went back to school, I thought I was going to do end of life work, working with like the terminally ill, because my dad was dying of Alzheimer's at the time. And I thought that would be something I'd want to do. And I couldn't get an internship because all the social worker students, MSWs, were getting those. And so that's when one of my supervisors said, it seems like a no-brainer that you would be a sex therapist. And I thought, oh, yeah, that does seem like a no-brainer. And so it just was kind of, a duh moment, but a natural progression of being in the health, wellness, sexuality, education field. To answer your other question, I think what I like best about it is I really love getting to know people. And so for me, some therapists are like, oh, I hate the first session, or I hate phone consults. I love it. Like this, I love getting to know you both. I love seeing you. I want to ask more questions, but that's like, it's the fun to me is understanding somebody, understanding what makes them tick. And then it's just an incredible privilege and honor to have somebody open up and share with you sometimes deeper thoughts and more secrets and transparently, vulnerable things than they share with anyone else in the world. And it's like, that's such a privilege to me. So yeah, holding space for other humans that are willing to say, you're safe enough, I trust you enough to tell you my innermost thoughts and put all the puzzle pieces out on the table so we can figure out how to turn them right side up and connect them again. is really just, I don't know, I feel really lucky to do the work that I do.
Well, I want to go off script then and say, is there something you want to ask us?
Oh, well, just while we were doing that, I was curious with you, Kari, when you said I can access, you can go to the sexual space quicker. What did you say? And I wondered for you, is it
Sex is um so I like, I do love sex, and sometimes that's all we have time for is what I was thinking.
Okay.
You know, we are a family with someone who has special needs with a disability, and I find that is very common if people stay married, through something like that, because in a lot of cases of people, parents of kids with special needs, those marriages don't last. And
Right.
but the ones who do, like, sometimes there's just enough time to like go for it, right? And because time is always an issue. So I was thinking that's easier, and it is important to also make time to, like, like we went on a bike ride to dinner the other night, and like just we're looking at each other and talking about something that wasn't about our kids, and it's rare for us to get those moments.
Oh,
That's what I
do you find that to get to an emotional connection with your husband, that there's anything guarded about you, or that it's difficult from like expressing yourself really intimately, or is it just the time and kiddo thing?
Such a great question. And it's because I think because there is a lot of emotion about some things that are sad, some things that are hard right now. And we're both, dealing with it. And so sometimes we don't go there because like we're both really sad about the same thing, or we don't want to name the same thing that we're sad about. And we're aware of that. We're working on that. But I think sometimes the emotion really isn't about us, but it's about like something that is hard or sad. Yeah. Yeah. So I think maybe that, and just my husband, very typical Irish Catholic upbringing, that was just didn't grow up with the ability to like name emotions or even express them. And I don't want to say nobody told me couldn't, but he didn't have a sense that he was like one of five. There's no time for that. Right. And like really found that it was important to be self-sufficient and, and kind of a doer, and not, so that's like part of his work in his 50s is just accessing emotions. But he is really romantic. He is.
One of the things that comes to mind, like that I do with a lot of clients, is there's a thing called a feeling wheel. I can text it or email it to you guys, but it shows like the middle is just the basic emotions of like happy, sad, angry, those things. And the next tier gets more granular, and then the next tier gets more granular, so that people that don't have a really great ability to identify the emotion they're feeling, they can use that to sort of go, oh, what is it that I'm feeling? And they have all these lists of words, right? And so I'll have some of my clients, like your husband, set a timer on their phone for like twice a day. And in that moment when the timer goes off, they just have to sort of like tune into themselves and say, what am I feeling in this moment? And then they use the feeling wheel to start identifying those emotions, because the more that they can identify those and then share them with you, the closer the two of you are. And that can be really cool. And then also like using these question decks when you're dealing with something like you are with a kiddo that is just pulling at all of your heartstrings, that if you have each other so well after almost 29 years, right? But then if you pull out some of these question cards, it can be a really fun way to get to know each other or hear their answer on a very, different question than you've ever talked about. And then you can get that closeness without having to go to the place of the stuff that's really pulling the sadness between the two of you, but kind of touching you. So those could be fun ways to open up and broaden that emotional connection without it being focused on something so sensitive. That's
yes. No, I totally agree. And I think I mean, Lisa was around us. She was up visiting. I think humor is also really big for us. Like, we do connect on, we're good at managing things, and we're good at making each other laugh. And like the time for tenderness is like really is what we need to protect. And I'm hearing you say that too. So I
love that. And Lisa, my question with you is just that my kids feel, well, some of them more than others feel like I've sort of been too sex positive, and I've literally traumatized them because I've talked about sex too much, or I've been too open, or those kinds of things. And I love that you said that you're so open and affectionate and all the things. And I'm curious if your kids, of course they do the like, But I was curious if you asked them if they thought what effect it's had on them. I would love, like, that would be an interesting question for you to say. Has it ever been too much? Do you think it's been a positive thing in your lives as kids growing up? Or I'm just curious what
That
they would.
I am going to ask Charlotte that for sure. What comes to me immediately was a really cute conversation we had the other day. My son was in town and the three of us went to breakfast, and we were talking about, as we do at this age, I snore, Darren snores, and so often one of us ends up on the couch.
Uh-huh.
And Charlotte said to Liam, but they always start in bed together. And I said to her the other day, I was like, that was such a nice reflection, that which is true. We always, and always is probably too strong. Sometimes he's watching television late, or I go to bed early. But if we go to bed at the same time, we always try to stay in the same room. And so it's one of those things you don't know really what they're catching on to, right? I mean, we say that all the time about kids. They're watching you and you don't know they're watching you. So that was a really lovely reflection. And it always makes me think about watching was it Family Ties, I guess, with Michael J. Fox. And remember that couple, that mom and dad were always so affectionate. Yeah. And I remember even at that young age thinking, that's the kind of relationship I want. And so Darren and I have just we have cultivated that. Darren he has no qualms about saying, is your mom hot? Oh, I love your mom's boobs in front of the kids all the time, so it's just a known, and so I think it has to be something really weird, like him actually being like, yeah, mom and I had sex last night or something like that, for them to actually recoil, because they're so used to hearing all of that. But awesome. I love that question. I am actually going to ask Charlotte. I look at her and Liam, my son, he's only 22 and he's been in a relationship for 5 years. And I do think they're going to get married. And it's interesting because Darren and I have been together since we were 18. Liam and Irina have been together since they were 17. Charlotte has boyfriends. She is not that she's not monogamous, but she is not like us in that respect. And so I think I look at them and I see them having really healthy communication and relationships. But I am curious and I will ask them.
I love that.
I asked my oldest recently, he's almost 23, like, in general, we weren't talking about relationships. Like, what are some of the things you always remember me saying? He's like, no means no, and make sure she, enjoys it. Or just like consent and then be good at it, right? Like,
oh, good job, Mom. you have done the job.
Gold medal.
Totally. Well, it's just so important to have these conversations. I think of like even my current partner, who was raised Catholic and so was much more like, uncomfortable with talking about it. First, we'll go hike Mount Si or something, and I'll be talking about something about sex. And it's at first when we were together, it was always like, oh, wait till these people pass. And I'm thinking, why would we not just walk and talk and make this more normalized so that all people, and people do, if you're talking about sex in public, they kind of like, on a plane once, I sat next to a pelvic floor specialist and the two of us were talking so loud about sex. I'm sure everyone was uncomfortable. But at the same time, if we start doing this more, then how many more people benefit from going, oh, okay, I don't need to react as this is a taboo topic. And so I love that all of your kids are getting talked to about it too. It's just,
how many more people could, and I'm not making this as a joke, like if we stop stigmatizing it, how many more people could actually be having amazing sex?
Right.
Exactly.
And it does feel like such an American thing too, right? Like we can't talk about sex, can't have sex, but good Lord, guns all over the place. It's just so, it's so discombobulated to me. Oh my gosh. I feel like I just want to stop recording and just keep talking. This has been so much fun.
It's fun to have you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh my God.
We got to get to our song.
I know. I was going to say the song. When I got to the song, I was like, oh, chef's kiss.
We love the song you brought. We asked for like a favorite song or a song that you love, and you shared what?
Okay, so I shared Escape, the Pina Colada song, which has been literally my favorite song since I was about 8 years old. So I remember my sister and I had these matching little radios that my uncle Lauren got us, and we would call back into KJR back then. You'd have to call in over and over the busy signal and request a song. And I would request that one all the time. And it's kind of funny because I think about that song to me was so romantic as a kid. And I don't know that I totally understood, but I thought, oh my gosh, they met and it was their person and they were like, you know, all of the words and the making love in the rain and all the things I just thought was so romantic. And then lo and behold, since 17, I have had like every person I've been with has been unfaithful. And I've dealt with a lot of betrayal, trauma, and infidelity and stuff. So then I look at that song and go, why doesn't that bother me then? And there's something about that. I don't know, it's the coming back together. It's the normalization of what we were talking about, that we're not maybe monogamous beings, or that we get stuck in these ruts and we don't really feel as satisfied. But then the fact that they're like, oh, wait, we do have all of these things in common. We do. And they walk in the bar and that just that, like the slow spread of the smile that's familiar and all of it. I don't know. It just is like the most romantic.
Well, it speaks to they aren't communicating. Here they are thinking they've got to go outside their relationship to find this perfect person. And lo and behold, the perfect person's right in front of them, but they're not communicating.
So they're learning new things about each other. So cool.
It just, I mean, I feel like in my mind, a good big takeaway from this is communication is key.
Yeah.
And you very well may need somebody to come in, such as yourself, to help facilitate that. But with communication, your sex can be amazing.
Yeah, as a byproduct of really great connection, right?
Yes.
Yes. So this was so fun. I feel like we definitely have to have you back. I'm so happy to spend this time with you. Thank you I know how busy you are, especially your Thursday. So thank you for making this time. I'm really grateful.
My pleasure.
You are so delightful.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad that Nicole got us connected and that I got the huge treat of being on here. So I will come back anytime. It was really nice to meet you both.
Thank you. And thank you for the work you do. It is incredibly important. And I can tell that you just do it with such care and grace and ease that I just feel very happy for all of your clients.
Thank you so much. That means a lot.
Where can people find you? We will put it in our show notes. It will be, on the posts we do around the week this drops, but yeah, tell people where to find you.
Yeah, my website is balancinglifeonline.com, because I've had the business since 2001. So at that point, the online was very big then. I wish it wasn't there now, but I'm not going to change it. So Balancing Life Online, and then it's the same for Instagram and my YouTube. I have a few videos on YouTube and Instagram, and that.
I'm going to go follow you right now.
Yay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again so much. And thanks to all of our listeners. Again, we would love any feedback you have. And if you need us to connect you with Monica, we're happy to do it. Yay. Thanks everyone for listening this week.
Have a great one.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.